This is No Hate Radio.
I'm no stranger to the rain. Oh, no. I'm no stranger to the rain.
This is being broadcast on, or being recorded, on August 13th, 2024. The reason I specifically include the dates right now is that we are engaged in a series of discussions and reports and generally statements about the American political landscape. This series is coinciding, of course, with the 2024 primary and general elections. This is a major election year. I think most everybody on both sides of the aisle would agree with that. And this is a year that is going to make a significant difference. And we've talked about the Supreme Court. We've talked about the Project 2025 and its political philosophy that's advanced on the self-identified conservative side of the doctrine. We've talked about pieces of the election process in the year 2024. What I'd like to do now, because this has occurred to me as a result of discussions that I've had in recent times, that most people don't involve themselves in. They don't involve themselves in it at all. It's the political structure from which the political landscape gets created. Most people would tell you that they were bored in their high school government class or civics class, or they've never studied it, or they simply don't have an interest in the intricacies of the structure of our government and the form of government and the way that we select and put people in office. They simply vote. I've heard this very thing said. They specifically vote for a candidate. They go in, fill out their ballot, and that's it for most people. Most don't participate in fundraising. Most don't participate in the election process. I want to stop right there, though. I want to stop and think just a minute. Everyone says this is a very consequential election this year. I'll stand for that proposition. Anyone will stand for that proposition. Also, that it makes a significant difference in how this country will proceed forward from here. And accordingly, regardless of what your particular preferences are as you listen to No Hate Radio today, I want to get you to follow with me in a discussion of the political structure in America that creates the system of selecting candidates and office holders and why it's important. Why do you care? Why does it make any difference? First thing I'd like to talk about is, you hear it. You hear it during the presidential years. You really don't much hear it any other time. The entity known as the Electoral College. Why do we have, as you know, on No Hate Radio, we try to address things from the viewpoint of why, and then also, what are we going to do about it? Well, I have several whys today. I'm not sure what we're going to do about it, but here it is. We have an Electoral College because it was built into the organic law, the Constitution of the United States, by the founders. And I think we need to step back and say exactly what motivated the idea of the Electoral College and why does it exist. It exists, I believe most historians would agree, because of the federalism concept. At the time of the formation of this nation, the concept was that there would be the states, and they would each have all of the inherent governmental and public rights, and only those that would be designated over to a overriding federal government would be given to the federal government, and that would be limited primarily to providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and generally in terms of having a military and a post office and certain other services and needs. And, of course, generally it would include having some kind of common currency. But the idea was that the states were the source and center of power in this federalism concept. One thing you may know or not know, may have never concerned yourself with, but it was true. Even the United States senators were not directly elected by the people. The United States senators were given long terms, 6 years, and they were selected by the various state legislatures. They were never directly elected by the people until the Constitution was amended many years after the formation. Part of that is the same reason that there is an electoral college. There was an idea that certain functions of government, certain structures of the federal government needed to be removed from what was referred to at that time as the whims of the people. And that the Senate, which as a result of that process became worldwide known over the years as the greatest deliberative body in the world because of A, the way it was selected, the length of the terms, and the rules within the Senate, which, for example, until recently required 60 votes to confirm a justice to the U.S. Supreme Court, until what you may have heard on the news is the nuclear option was exercised. The party in power reduced that to a simple majority, and since then the process of selecting Supreme Court justices has materially changed. So let's go back to that. The Electoral College was created amidst this federalism concept, and also because, and it's very hard, I think, today for us to do this, as I sit here talking into an electronic box on the airwaves, and that we all are used to phones and radios and the internet and social media and automobiles and airplanes, to understand the world from the view of the founders. There were 13 colonies, 13 separate states. Each state had its own structure. There was no rapid transportation. There were no direct roads between them. There was certainly no method of communications between them. And none of those things had even been conceived of. No telephone, no telegraph, none of the things that we consider an integral part of society today existed. So the thought was, because remember another thing, only white males could vote. And in fact, only white males who were property owners could vote. So the constituency was very, very small and was almost monochromatic, and it was located in 13 separate colonies, and they rarely would speak to each other because it was a very difficult process to do that. So they designed a government that was supposedly going to have the power, the operating power to create and maintain the federal government, which was the overlay government for the states as they conceived it, and that it would be regulated by a very carefully selected group of people who would be at least one stage removed from the, quote, whims of the American people. Now consider it today. Social media, advertising on television, internet communications, airplanes, automobiles, rapid transportation. Consider, is there a purpose today for the Electoral College? Does it still perform a valid service for us, or has it become an anachronism that could, in fact, derail the will of the people and derail, in another form, the democracy itself? An example, Bush versus Gore, the year 2000. President Bush was elected because of the Electoral College. He did not achieve the highest number of the popular vote. Al Gore did. but the popular vote did not control. It's controlled by the various electoral votes of the several states. And as it turned out, President George W. Bush, through his campaign, won the, quote, the right states. You now hear it constantly referred to in the media, the battleground states. So that's where all the campaigns focus. And you say, well, that's maybe only happened once, and that's an anomaly, and maybe we need to keep the Electoral College. I would cite you to Trump versus Clinton, 2016. President Donald Trump did not obtain the highest number of popular votes. Hillary Clinton did. But he got the right votes. He got the votes in the right states. So now we have a thing called the battleground states. What does that do? It causes all the campaigns to focus on particular states and to a great extent disregard many of the states. It causes an unequal effect on votes. It causes some votes to count really big and some votes to not count at all. And accordingly, I pose this question as I leave the subject to the Electoral College. If we were doing it over, if the founding individuals who put this country together and wrote the roadmap in the form of the Constitution knew what we know now, if they could be sitting at the table today, would they do the Electoral College? Would it even exist given the circumstances of today? And I'll leave that to your thinking. I certainly have an opinion on that, but everyone should think about that, because twice in very recent history, the direction of America was decided and a leader was installed, sworn in, became the top executive in this country with less than the total vote count of the American, less than the majority vote from the American people who voted in the election. Whether you consider that to be a fundamental problem or not, it's nonetheless a fact. Now, the second thing I want to talk about, and I realize that a lot of people, as I said, I know this, don't want to be intimately involved and are bored by these structural processes, but I promise that during the course of this statement today, during the course of our installment today, I'm going to try to explain to you why you really need, if you're that voter out there, the citizen, the working American, the person who's affected by all this, why you need to try and understand it as best you can, regardless of how boring it is to you or how much it in the past has not affected your life. Number two, political parties. Why do we have them? Where did they come from? Well, our version of political parties did come from the United Kingdom, from England, and from the way they had structured their governmental system, the Whigs and the Tories and the Labour Party and the other parties. And there's history. There's certainly history to associate that. But one of the initial reasons for the creation of political parties was so that, because there are a lot of offices to be elected, persons could identify with individuals of like mind. They could say, this political party, whatever it might be, and there have been various parties of various names in the United States over the history of the country, but generally the notion was we will subscribe to a certain set of ideas. We will have that in common. So if we say today I'm a Democrat, or we say today I'm a Republican, or I'm a member of another lesser party, lesser in numbers party, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, or Socialist Party, or something of that nature, then what happens is that people tend to line up behind candidates who identify with a particular party structure. And the result of that is that the process of nominating candidates becomes a function of the party, and all political parties in this country are privileged to write their own rules about how they're going to go about nominating their candidates to go in the general election. Political parties in this country have become the powerhouse in power politics in this country. You have party primaries everywhere. And these party primaries, I know Iowa holds caucuses. There are a few, I'd call it residuals from another time. But for the most part, their primaries are held. And these are where the people of a particular party run a pre-race, essentially, to decide from among those who would like to be that party's nominee who's going to get the job. And the parties, therefore, run that structure, and they decide how it runs, and they decide who gets to play, and then that person becomes the candidate in the general election. When parties take power in a particular political subdivision, they generally want to try to restructure the districts. And it's a process called gerrymandering, and they generally want to restructure it to guarantee that whoever wins their primary becomes the not only candidate, but the winner, because there's no need for the general election at all, even though they hold it. But I can tell you, for example, from the county that I served in political office for many years, whoever won a given primary was essentially had won the race, because that party had gained 80% of the electorate in the county. So the political party structure is designed to play a numbers game, and it's designed to mathematically exclude people from other political parties or ideas from holding office. And that's what their ultimate purpose is. In that regard, in order to gather people into this particular political party, because, again, it's a numbers game, what they do is they create political platforms. They create ideas. This is going to be the Democratic Party platform for the presidential election of 2006 or 4, or whatever it was. This is going to be the GOP platform for 2024. In it, they call them planks. They have different ideas. We want this done. We want this done. We want this done. These are our goals. And the notion about building these platforms is to get people to identify with that set of ideas, so that they now say, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, or if you can't identify very well with either one of them, you got the group called I am an independent. Most of the states will exclude those people from being able to vote in party primaries, and trying to neuter the influence of anyone who won't subscribe to either one team or the other. And that's the party structure, and that's how it developed over a long period of time in America, such that we have the two major parties. Some persons listening here today may not be aware of it. It's not a greatly famous statement, but President George Washington said consistently that political parties were evil and should be avoided. He did not believe that we should cast votes and gather into groups that were based on a political party platform, and therefore not give the individual voter the ability to agree or disagree with a particular candidate. They had to sign on for the whole process. Now, conventions, which are held, states hold a convention, and then there is a national convention for each of the major political parties. The smaller ones don't, because these are very expensive things to put on. But over the years, they were very hotly debated, and there would be candidates, and you would hear votes for their favorite son, and there would be lots of competition about who was going to actually get the party's nomination. And over the years, with the advent of social media and the internet and polls and a lot of other things, and primarily money flowing to one candidate or another, the process of these party conventions, they've simply become coronations. That we already know who's going to be the candidate, so we're going to put on essentially an entertainment show, and we're going to have, it's designed to fire up the base. You've heard the term in the news, fire up the base. It's not a selection process anymore because we already know who's going to be selected. But at these conventions, they will adopt platforms at a state level, and then they'll try to advance their state level platform to a national level. And if people read it, although mostly people don't, but if they were to read it, they would get an idea. How is it going to be that this party is going to run the government if we elect them, if we get them there? This particular year, we have Project 2025, which identifies, I think, in extreme, kind of excruciating detail. All 922 pages of it is going to tell us how the GOP will proceed forward if they are elected. The Democratic Party has a platform also. They don't have such a thing as Project 2025, but they also have a platform. I'll give you an example of how you can read what direction a party's going. I'll use the state of Texas. They had a GOP they had their state convention earlier this year, and usually they build on the prior platform to build a new platform. Well, the prior platform had in it language that said that the Texas GOP will have no connection with or affiliation with or association in any way with white supremacist or Nazi or fascist groups. It was simply an aspirational statement. We will not do that. We will not be a party to that. This year, in 2024, the Texas GOP simply deleted that paragraph from their party platform. What would one conclude from that? I think it has to do with context and what you think occurred and what the debate was that caused it to happen. But it has a kind of a ominous, viewpoint, or not an ominous viewpoint. It has kind of an ominous feel about it if you're just seeing what was and seeing what was taken out. Anyway, these party platforms at these state levels all go as a part of the national convention, and frankly, that and put on a show are the two things that the national conventions do today. Their original purpose has been obscured. But parties, therefore, I'll just say it this way, I stand for this proposition. The major political parties drive the train. They say who's going to get to be the candidate. If they have the governor in office in their state that's of their party, it's going to gerrymander the districts in their favor, and they're going to be able to control whichever party it is, going to be able to control the votes. The voters become almost an afterthought in some of these jurisdictions because the conclusion, the outcome is predetermined. It's already known because the numbers game has been played, and that happens a lot. So you have these battleground states where presumably there is not a tight enough predetermination, so there's actually a chance that the voters can make a difference. So where do the campaigns go? They go to the battleground states. Right now, I think most of us would be surprised to know that there's only about 6 or 8 of them in the United States. So that's where the campaigns are going to emphasize their efforts and so forth. Now, the other thing that has dramatically changed political structure-wise and I think it's very, very important to think about, is polling. In the past history, when all these structures were put in place, we really didn't have such thing as polls. Some of the original organizations that are still highly credible, like the Gallup organization or the New York Times or some of the other combined polling organizations, started early on, and they started doing it, contacting voters to determine what their preferences were, and more or less trying to communicate how is America feeling about this particular candidate or this race or who should win or who should not win. Methodologies have varied a lot over the years. For example, I think it was learned in the 2016 presidential election by the major polling organizations that they have to figure a different way to contact the proper selection group, the proper group to go ask, because landline telephones have disappeared for the most part. And written correspondence has gotten more expensive and slower and less responded to. And other barriers exist, and the polling organizations have really been scrambling to try and get more accuracy and a more structured and a more reliable methodology, and some have done that. The Gallup or the New York Times or some of those that you've heard of can still provide some information about how things are going, but one of the things we need to understand about polls, and if you don't remember much that I said about polls, remember this: they are a snapshot in time. As a predictor of ultimate election results, they get less reliable the farther out they are. Today, I think we're 82 days from the general election day, which means that actually in some states, the electional process will take place beginning 2 weeks before that. Mail-in votes, absentee votes, through the different methods and structures that are allowed in each individual state about how you can vote early and whatnot. So voting is going to start to take place around the United States in less than the 82 days we're talking about. But the final election day is about 82 days away at this time. So polls are being taken repetitively in an effort to be accurate and in an effort to contact the correct selection group, the one most reliable that you'll hear in the news. This poll was a poll of likely voters. That means that the polling organization has determined that the person they've gotten in touch with is very likely to vote, and they have reasons to believe why that person is likely to vote. Or a general poll might be taken. You know, how about this state, the people in this state, or persons who are likely to be Republican or Democrat voters. Polls, the real challenging one is to try and find independent voters, independents who lean conservative, independents who lean progressive. So these are very, very sophisticated now in the way they try and track that. Polling is all about timing, and it's all about the accuracy of who you get in contact with. As one reporter that I heard talk about it said, don't bet the mortgage on a poll, but on the other hand, it is likely to give you some reasonable idea as to what way the wind is blowing, as it were. Remember this, too, and I think I have to remember this. I tell myself this regularly as I research these things. 2 weeks in politics can be a lifetime. Things change overnight. So the polling organizations try to hang on and catch up and know what's going on from a day-to-day issue. Well, why is all this important? It's important because the voter is built into the input of the voter is built into the structure that is designed almost exclusively by the major political parties in America. So those who say, I don't play politics, I don't like to be in one party or another one, I don't this, I don't that, you might not want to admit that, but what you're doing is saying, I'm taking away part of my input into how things ought to happen and how the government ought to run, because you didn't make that decision, but the party structure made the decision that if you're not on one team or the other, there's a limit to what you're going to get to do. Particularly in gerrymandered states where the general election is pretty meaningless, you will find that people say, well, my vote doesn't matter. In some cases, that's correct, because the political structure has predetermined the general election through the various vehicles that they use in primaries. And something else I want to add to this in terms of structure, because I know that the average person, most of us, don't want to hear this civics lesson, but it's impactful in a big way. What about down ballot races? Everybody wants to get out every 4 years and vote for president. But in today's world, there is such a vast communications network. Everyone, I believe, unless you've been asleep or in a coma or something, realize that these Senate races are virtually almost as important as the top ballot race, because if a presidential candidate is elected, maybe it's one you wanted. Maybe you're a Kamala Harris fan and you want to see that elected, or you're a Donald Trump fan. But if the Senate majority doesn't get elected that matches your candidate's, remember, political party, you'll result in what we've heard in the news media a lot about gridlock. The Senate will do everything possible to thwart the efforts of an executive who is of a different political party. These are actually despicable, because the people, whichever political party you are, if you're in the United States Senate, you have an obligation to go there and govern. But now you're directly elected as a result of constitutional amendment. You don't have what the founding individuals who created the government tried to insulate you from the whims of the people, as it were, with your 6-year term and your being elected by the legislature. No, now you're elected by the people, the same as the House. So the Senate races and the rules in the Senate have been dumbed down, as it were, or destroyed, to the point that the Senate would no longer be deemed as the greatest deliberative body in the world, because it is simply elected by the people, same kind of campaigns, raising large sums of money from constituent groups, same as the House, same as the federalistic concepts that were put in by our founders just don't exist anymore. And an example being this: the House of Representatives, over a couple of hundred years in this country, impeached the President of the United States twice, about 100 years apart, something like that. Since then, there's been a frenzy of impeachment. Every time there is a hotly contested issue in the House of Representatives, somebody talks about impeachment, or somebody talks about removing the Speaker of the House. Over the years, speakers have been pretty much the anchor, and they've stayed for fairly long periods of time, because that's the operating, driving force behind how the House operates. Now, as we've recently seen, when McCarthy was elected Speaker of the House, it took 14 votes, and then he was removed by his own party structure. So the Speaker of the House has been the whole discipline, the whole looking forward, trying to be accountable to history, trying to be accountable to constituents, is really declined in the House of Representatives to a point where it's my sad opinion that the voters are pretty much disregarded. And this matter is argued among the power brokers and the spin doctors in Washington, D.C. So I say all this to bring up this cogent point. We all have it as an incumbent obligation to try and understand how this process all works and to involve ourselves deeply enough in it to actually make an impactful decision by voting or giving financial contributions or time or effort or signs or whatever you choose to do to help a candidate, more than one candidate presumably, be elected that you believe will carry America forward in the way that you philosophically believe it should go. And if you choose the I'm not going to participate type of approach, I fear that those who have intentions to change the fundamental structure of our government and to change the way America operates politically and to essentially eliminate the of and by and for the people part of the Constitution will prevail, and they will prevail not because they actually win, but they will prevail because of apathy. They will prevail because many people choose to step away from what they consider to be the distasteful world of politics. So what are we going to do about it? Well, what we're going to do about it is either nothing and choose not to play and then bemoan the result when we don't like what happens, or we're going to take the time, effort, and energy to study and know how the system works in our particular area, know where we can be impactful, and take the time, effort, and energy to do that. With that, the installment of No Hate Radio on the political structure is coming to an end. I would ask you this, as I do each time, anyone who's listening to our podcast, if you have a subject that you would like to see discussed, and know that right now we're on the political landscape in America, and that's pretty important, and that's going to be the lead subject. And if you have something you want discussed within that context, please either call the number 442-4-NO-HATE or send an email through the website, nohateradio.com, and tell us what you would like to have discussed, what you'd like to talk about, or what you'd like to hear about. Also tell us if you believe there is a speaker that you know. We broadcast from St. Petersburg, Florida. We have had speakers come appear remotely from other parts of the country. We have had people travel here from other parts of the state. And we would be glad to try and accommodate speakers that you think might be helpful to discussions that affect us all, that have something to do with our welfare and benefit, and as we go forward. The underlying subject between all of this, not between, but underlying all of this, is that we have to go forward as a nation and live together. We need to have common goals. That's true enough. But we need, in this country, and I stand on this proposition because history will bear me out, we need a healthy dose of diversity, equity, and inclusion in order to ever achieve the goal that our founders set out in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, and that we've always idealized but have never achieved, which is all persons are created equal. And I think that that's a worthy long-term mantra for No Hate Radio, and that's what we're here for. Please call us or email us or write us if you can contribute or if you want us to do something different. And other than that, we're going to wrap it up today by saying this is No Hate Radio. Have a great day.